Dad canceled my wedding saying, "We're not funding this drama." Then the venue called him the next day. Before I take you through what happened, stay with me because this isn't just a wedding story. It's about family, betrayal, and how one phone call changed everything. If you've ever trusted people only to be let down in the worst way, you'll understand me. My name is Madison Carter, but everyone calls me Maddie. I'm 27 years old, born and raised in North Carolina. For most of my life, I tried to be the good daughter. I followed the rules, I studied hard, I rarely talked back. My dad, Charles Carter, was the kind of man who wanted to control everything around him. He wasn't cruel in the physical sense, but his words were sharp enough to cut. He had opinions about how I dressed, who I dated, and what choices I made. My mom, Linda, was softer, gentle, quiet, the type of woman who always smoothed over fights instead of standing up to him. Despite his controlling side, I believed my dad wanted the best for me. That's why I thought he'd be happy when I introduced him to Ethan Brooks, the man I fell in love with. Ethan was charming, polite, and made me laugh in ways I hadn't in years. After 2 years of dating, he proposed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like my life was falling into place. Planning the wedding was supposed to be exciting. I imagined the flowers, the music, the dress, and walking down the aisle with both my parents by my side. Ethan's family was involved too, and at first, everyone seemed excited. But cracks started to show, tiny disagreements over seating, money, and traditions. I brushed them off because what wedding doesn't have stress? I thought it was normal. Then one morning, without warning, everything collapsed. My dad called me into the kitchen, his face set like stone. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He just looked me in the eyes and said, "We're not funding this drama anymore. The wedding's canceled." I froze, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear. At first, I thought he was bluffing, maybe trying to scare me into fixing things between the family. But within hours, I got confirmation. He had already called the venue, the caterers, the florist, every single vendor, and shut it all down. He didn't even tell me before doing it. I felt like the ground had opened beneath me. All the months of planning, all the money, all the dreams I had of standing in front of everyone I loved. It was gone in one conversation I wasn't even a part of. And the worst part, he didn't even say it with regret. To him, it was simple. He decided my wedding was drama, and that was enough reason to destroy it. That night, I sat in my room staring at the stack of invitations we hadn't even sent out yet, wondering how the man who raised me could take such a huge decision out of my hand. Little did I know, the real reason behind his actions would hurt even more than the cancellation itself. The morning after my father told me the wedding was canceled, I still couldn't believe it. I thought maybe he was bluffing, trying to prove a point. But then the calls started coming in. The florist, the caterer, and finally the venue manager, all confirming that Charles Carter, my father, had called personally to cancel everything. He hadn't asked me, hadn't warned me, just shut it all down as if I were a child who couldn't be trusted to make her own choices. When I confronted him, my voice was shaking. "Dad, how could you do this without even asking me? This is my wedding, not yours." He barely looked up from the newspaper in his hand, calm, cold, like this was nothing. "Madison, I'm not going to stand by and fund a circus. Ethan's family is stirring up drama about money, about who sits where, about every tiny detail. I won't have our family name dragged through the mud because of their nonsense." His words didn't make sense. Weddings have disagreements, but none of it seemed bad enough to cancel everything. I begged him to reconsider, but he just shook his head and said, "It's done. Don't push me on this." No explanation beyond that. No sympathy for the tears burning in my eyes. Just a wall. I ran to Ethan, desperate for support. I expected anger, outrage, maybe even a plan to fix things. But he was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone, like this wasn't his wedding that had just been destroyed. "Babe, maybe it's for the best," he said quietly, not even meeting my eyes. "Your dad clearly doesn't want to deal with this drama. Maybe we can figure something out later." His calmness felt like a slap. How could he be so relaxed when everything I'd dreamed about was slipping through my fingers? The Ethan I thought I knew should have been fighting for me, standing with me. Instead, he seemed almost relieved. That tiny seed of doubt planted itself in my chest, and I hated myself for even thinking it. That night, I sat alone in my room, the silence heavier than anything I'd ever felt. The dress was still hanging in the closet, untouched. The wedding binder I'd spent months building sat on the desk, suddenly meaningless. All the visions I'd had of walking down the aisle, of seeing Ethan's face light up when he saw me in white, of dancing with my dad at the reception, gone in an instant. I had always thought betrayal came with big explosions, yelling, fights, broken trust you could see from a mile away. But this betrayal felt quiet, almost suffocating. My father wouldn't explain, Ethan wouldn't react, and I was left in the middle, wondering why no one was fighting for me. For the first time, I began to fear that maybe the wedding wasn't just canceled. Maybe my whole future was. The day after the cancellations, I got a call from the venue manager. At first, I thought it was just another confirmation that everything was off, but something she said stopped me cold. "We were surprised to hear you backed out, Maddie," she said softly, like she was trying to be gentle. My heart dropped. "What do you mean I backed out?" I asked, my voice trembling. She hesitated, then explained. "Your father told us you decided not to go through with the wedding. He said you didn't want to embarrass yourself." I stood there frozen, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My father hadn't just canceled everything, he'd lied. He told them it was my decision. Why? What was he protecting me from? Confused and desperate for answers, I called my bridesmaid, Jenna. She hesitated when I asked if she knew anything, and I could tell she was holding something back. Finally, she blurted it out. "Maddie." I didn't want to say anything, but people have been talking. "Ethan's been close with Sam. Too close." Sam. My cousin. My maid of honor. My best friend since childhood. For a moment, the words didn't make sense, like they were in another language. I laughed nervously, asking her to repeat herself. But she didn't laugh back. I saw them together after the rehearsal dinner last week. It didn't look innocent. My chest felt like it was caving in. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, memories flashing like lightning. Ethan and Sam whispering when they thought no one was watching. The way Sam brushed off questions about the wedding details. How Ethan never seemed upset when my dad canceled everything. The pieces started snapping into place, and the picture forming was unbearable. It wasn't just about drama. My father must have found out about Ethan and Sam. Instead of telling me, instead of letting me see the truth for myself, he decided to handle it his way. He canceled the wedding to stop the scandal, to save the Carter family name from humiliation. He thought he was protecting me, but in reality, he was protecting his pride. The betrayal sank in slowly, like poison in my veins. Ethan, the man I thought I'd spend my life with, sneaking around with my cousin, the girl I trusted to stand beside me as maid of honor, and my own father, deciding I was too weak to handle the truth, lying to everyone and making me look like the one who had backed out. I sat in silence for hours, staring at the wall, until tears finally broke free. It wasn't just about losing a wedding anymore. It was about realizing that the people I loved most had joined hands, whether through lies, secrets, or silence, in tearing apart my future. The wedding was gone, yes. But the worst part was knowing my trust had been stolen with. I couldn't keep it inside any longer. That evening, I drove to Ethan's apartment, my hands shaking the whole way. The moment he opened the door, I demanded answers. "Are you sleeping with Samantha?" The words flew out before I could stop them. His eyes widened for just a second, just long enough for me to see the flicker of guilt. But then he slipped into that calm, practiced tone I knew too well. "Maddie, you're being paranoid," he said, almost laughing. "This wedding stress is getting to you. You're imagining things. Sam is like a sister to me." The gaslighting was smooth, like he'd rehearsed it. He even reached out, trying to pull me into his arms, but I stepped back. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't try to make me feel crazy." He sighed dramatically, shaking his head. "You're ruining this with your insecurities. Do you want to push me away before we even get married?" But his words couldn't erase the images burned in my mind. Ethan and Sam whispering at family gathering, the strange tension when I walked into a room, the little lies that didn't add up. My heart was telling me I wasn't wrong, and for once, I chose to listen to it. When I left that night, I was still torn between doubt and denial, but I couldn't sleep. Something in me snapped, and I opened Ethan's laptop, the one he had carelessly left signed into his accounts the last time he came over. My hands trembled as I clicked through his messages, and there it was. Proof that shattered me completely. Flirty texts from Sam. Inside jokes about me. Messages at 1 a.m. saying things like, "She'll never find out," and "Last night was amazing, can't stop thinking about." My stomach turned so violently I thought I'd throw up. Every line I read cut deeper than the last. These weren't mistakes. This was a double life he had been living right under my nose. I shut the laptop so hard it echoed in the empty room. My whole body was shaking and tears blurred my vision. All I could think was how my father had known, how he must have discovered this before I did. He hadn't told me. He hadn't trusted me with the truth. Instead, he canceled everything, like I was some fragile little girl who needed to be shielded from reality. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just betrayed by Ethan. I was betrayed by my own father. One man who was supposed to love me chose to cheat on me, and the other chose to lie to me for my own good. Both of them had taken away my right to decide what to do with my life. I sank to the floor, clutching my chest as if I could hold myself together. But nothing could stop the truth from tearing me apart. Ethan wasn't the man I thought he was, and my father wasn't the protector I believed in. I was alone in this, completely and utterly alone. I couldn't carry the weight of what I had found on my own. The messages between Ethan and Samantha haunted me, and the silence in my chest felt louder than any scream. So I went to my mom. She was in the kitchen, folding laundry like it was any other quiet afternoon. I sat down at the table and whispered, "Mom, I know about Ethan and Sam." Her hands froze in midair, a towel dangling from her grip. She didn't ask me what I meant, didn't demand proof. Instead, she closed her eyes and her shoulders sank. That's when I knew. She already knew. Tears burned my eyes. "You knew and you didn't tell me?" My voice cracked with disbelief. She put the towel down and covered her face with her hand. "Maddie, I wanted to, but your father said it was best to handle it quietly. He didn't want the family embarrassed." Embarrassed. That word cut deeper than the betrayal itself. My parents weren't protecting me. They were protecting the Carter name, the reputation they cared so much about. My happiness had been a casualty in their war against gossip. I pushed away from the table, my chair scraping against the tile. "So you both knew I was about to marry a liar and a cheat, and instead of telling me, you let Dad cancel everything and make me look like the coward who backed out." My mom's lips trembled, but she didn't deny it. "We thought it was better this way. You didn't need that humiliation." Humiliation? I was already humiliated, not just by Ethan and Samantha, but by my own parents, who thought I wasn't strong enough to handle the truth. The family divide came quickly after that. When I confronted Samantha, she smirked, unbothered, like I was the one being dramatic. She even had the audacity to say Ethan told her I wasn't mature enough. I cut her off then and there, swearing I would never forgive her. But the rest of the family didn't make it easy. At Sunday dinner, whispers floated around the table. Some relatives avoided eye contact, others gave me sympathetic looks, and a few even suggested I just let it go since the wedding hadn't happened. My aunt leaned over and whispered, "Families survive because we keep secrets, Matt. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be." That was the moment I realized how deep the rot went. To them, image mattered more than truth, silence mattered more than justice. I was expected to swallow the betrayal, keep smiling, and pretend nothing happened. But I couldn't. I wouldn't. As the dinner dragged on, I sat there rigid, the food on my plate untouched. I felt like a stranger at my own family table, surrounded by people who would rather protect lies than stand with. The tension grew heavier each day, and I knew something inside me had shifted forever. I was done being their puppet. I was done protecting their image at the expense of my own heart. I couldn't live with half-truths and whispers anymore. The air in my parents' house felt poisoned, and every time I saw Samantha's name pop up on family group chats, rage boiled inside me. I needed to hear it from her mouth, no more rumors or secondhand confessions. So I called her, told her to meet me at the little cafe we used to go to when we were kids. She agreed without hesitation, like she had nothing to hide. When she walked in, she looked polished, confident, not at all like someone who had stabbed me in the back. She sat down across from me and smiled faintly, almost amused. "So, Maddie," she said casually, stirring her iced coffee, "I guess you found out." The smugness in her voice made my stomach twist. My hands clenched under the table. "You slept with my fiancé," I said flatly, my voice shaking. "You destroyed everything." "Why?" She leaned back, crossed her arms, and tilted her head as if I were asking something silly. "Because Ethan came to me. He told me you weren't ready for marriage, that you're too naive, too childish. He said you wouldn't understand him the way I do." Her words hit like a knife. My chest burned, but I forced myself to hold her gaze. She smirked, like she enjoyed watching me crumble. "Don't take it personally, Maddie. It just happened. He wanted me, and I wanted him. For a moment, I wanted to scream, to throw the glass in front of me, to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd cause. But I knew if I let myself lose control, she'd win. She wanted to see me break, to confirm that I wasn't mature enough. So I swallowed hard, blinked back tears, and stood up. My legs trembled, but I forced strength into my voice. "Enjoy him, Samantha, because someday, you'll know exactly what it feels like to be lied to by the person you trusted most." I walked out of that cafe without looking back, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the steering wheel just to steady them. But beneath the shaking, beneath the tears threatening to spill, there was something else, a fire. That was my breaking point. I realized I couldn't just let this go. Couldn't just crawl into a corner and lick my wounds while they carried on like nothing happened. The betrayal was too deep, too sharp, to walk away quietly. Ethan had chosen lies, Samantha had chosen betrayal, and my father had chosen silence. No, they weren't going to bury this. If they wanted to keep their reputations polished and untouchable, then I'd be the one to tear the mask off. My revenge wouldn't come through screaming matches or fights. It would come through truth, exposing them for what they really were. And I promised myself in that moment, I wouldn't stop until everyone saw it. I knew I couldn't go into this blindly. If I exploded and told everyone at once, they'd dismiss me as emotional, bitter, dramatic, the very labels my father loved to use when I didn't fall in line. No, I had to be smart. I had to play the game the way they did, quietly, strategically. The first step was Ethan's parents. They had always treated me kindly, and I wanted them to hear it from me before the gossip reached them. I invited them over for coffee, keeping my tone casual so they wouldn't suspect anything. When we sat down, I looked his mother in the eye and said, "I need to tell you something about Ethan and Samantha." The words caught in my throat, but I pushed through, explaining the texts, the lies, the nights they thought I didn't notice. For a long moment, the room was silent. His mother's face drained of color, while his father clenched his jaw so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Finally, his mother whispered, "Not Samantha," as if naming her made it real. When I showed them the proof, their anger erupted, not at me, but at him. His father slammed his fist on the table and swore that Ethan had disgraced their family. Walking out of that house, I felt a weight lift. Not because the betrayal hurt any less, but because finally, someone other than me knew the truth. The next opportunity came at a family gathering the following weekend. It wasn't planned for me to say anything, but as I sat there listening to relatives laugh and chat while Samantha carried herself like nothing had happened, I knew I couldn't stay silent. Still, I didn't make a scene. Instead, I pulled people aside one by one. My aunt in the kitchen, my cousin by the porch. Each time, I spoke softly, calmly, but with enough detail that they couldn't brush me off. Ethan and Samantha betrayed me. That's why the wedding was canceled. My father lied to protect them, but I won't. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to announce it over dinner. I just let the truth drip quietly into their ears, like water seeping into cracks. And just like water, it spread faster than anyone could stop. By the time dessert was served, I could feel the shift. Whispers circled the table. Eyes cut toward Samantha, then quickly away. Ethan wasn't there, but his absence became its own statement. Samantha, for all her smugness, started to squirm under the weight of glances she couldn't explain. She tried to laugh louder, smile wider, but it only made her look desperate. I didn't have to humiliate her outright. The truth was already doing it for me. By the end of the night, I realized my plan was working. I didn't need revenge that screamed. I needed revenge that whispered, crawling into every corner until it couldn't be ignored. And that was exactly what was happening. The fallout was more brutal than Maddie could have imagined, and yet, in some twisted way, it was exactly what she had hoped for. The whispers she had planted spread like wildfire, leaping from one relative to another, then out into the wider community. By the end of the week, Ethan could barely walk into his office without hearing snide remarks about his backup bride. His parents, normally the type to shield him no matter what, summoned him to their home. Maddie didn't need to be there to know how it went down. Ethan's father, a stern man who valued loyalty above everything, cut him off without hesitation. His mother, who had once treated Maddie like a daughter, told Ethan he was a stranger to her now. The money, the family name, the easy path he had always relied on, gone in an instant. Samantha didn't fare much better. When the truth reached her family, her siblings recoiled as though she were contagious. The smug confidence she had wielded when Maddie confronted her dissolved when her phone calls went unanswered, when her parents refused to let her visit, when even her younger sister crossed the street to avoid her. For the first time, Samantha was isolated, and Maddie knew that was the punishment that stung the most. But the hardest blow came from within Maddie's own house. Her father, red-faced with rage, stormed into her room late one evening. "You humiliated us," he shouted, his voice trembling with fury. "Do you have any idea how this looks? Your mess. Our family dragged through the mud because you couldn't keep your mouth shut." Maddie stared at him, her chest tightening, her fists clenching at her sides. All her life, she had bowed to that booming voice, had let his words dictate her choices. But something inside her had shifted, broken, then rebuilt stronger. She rose to her feet, her eyes locked on him. "No, Dad. You humiliated me the moment you decided your pride mattered more than my happiness. You called off my wedding not because of what Ethan did, but because you were worried about how it looked. You sided with appearances instead of your own daughter." Her father faltered, taken aback by her tone. She had never raised her voice to him before. "You lost the right to control my life the moment you chose pride over me," Maddie continued, her voice steady despite the tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "I will not let you silence me anymore." For the first time, her father had no reply. He just stood there, his jaw working, his fists tightening, but no words came. Maddie realized then that she wasn't afraid of him anymore. As he turned and left the room in silence, Maddie felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had exposed Ethan, faced Samantha, and now stood tall against her father. The girl who had once been silenced by others' decisions was gone. In her place was someone unshakable, someone who finally owned her truth. Maddie's revenge wasn't fire and fury. It was silence, precision, and the kind of dignity that left no room for pity. After the chaos of whispers, slammed doors, and betrayed families, she woke up one morning and realized she wasn't broken. She was free. The first thing she did was pack up her things from her parents' house. No more suffocating under her father's heavy-handed pride. No more second-guessing her every move. She found a small apartment with peeling paint and a noisy street outside. But to Maddie, it felt like the palace of her own independence. Every box she unpacked was a reminder that she could breathe again, without anyone telling her how. She threw herself into her career with a fire she didn't know she had. Long hours, late nights, weekends spent drafting proposals instead of attending family dinners. It was all hers. No Ethan waiting to support her only when it benefited. No Samantha lurking in the background, pretending to be her friend while stealing what wasn't hers. For once, Maddie's life revolved around her goals, her dreams, her choices. And every small success tasted sweeter because it was hers alone. One by one, she called the vendors for the canceled wedding, the florist, the caterer, the photographer. Each conversation started with a lump in her throat, but she insisted on handling it herself. No family interference, no father's checkbook bailing her out. She managed the refunds, absorbed the losses where she had to, and walked away knowing she had faced the mess head-on. Every returned deposit felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Ethan came crawling back, of course. They always do. He showed up at her apartment door with that sheepish smile, the same one that once melted her heart. He said the words she used to dream of hearing. "I made a mistake, Maddie. It should have been you. I love you." But now they sounded hollow, like a cheap rehearsal. Maddie didn't even let him inside. She stood in the doorway, arms folded, her voice steady. "You made a choice, Ethan, and I made mine. Go live with it." He flinched at her calm, almost gentle dismissal. It cut deeper than shouting ever could. He wanted tears, maybe forgiveness, or at least anger. Instead, he got nothing. Just Maddie shutting the door, leaving him on the outside where he belonged. Samantha didn't fare any better. Her new life with Ethan was nothing but ashes. The family who once embraced her now treated her like a stranger. Her siblings avoided her, her parents kept their distance, and the social circles she craved whispered behind her back. The betrayal she thought would make her powerful only left her stranded. Maddie, on the other hand, rose higher every day. She didn't need revenge speeches, dramatic confrontations, or public humiliation. The quiet rebuilding of her life, the career she built, the freedom she claimed, the peace she finally felt, that was the real revenge. And as Samantha and Ethan sank deeper into regret, Maddie soared untouchable. The months that followed were strangely quiet for Maddie, but within that silence she discovered something she had never known before, her own voice. She had spent years bending herself to fit the outlines her father drew for her, the expectations Ethan whispered into her ear, the shadows Samantha cast with her comparisons and taunts. And yet, when everything crumbled, none of them were there to help her pick up the pieces. She was alone, but that loneliness became her foundation. She thought often about betrayal, how it wasn't faceless strangers who had broken her. It was the three people who should have been her shield. Ethan, who promised her forever but traded her in for convenience. Samantha, her cousin who shared her childhood secrets and then stabbed her in the back without hesitation. And worst of all, her father, who should have protected her happiness but instead crushed it under the weight of his own pride. And yet, looking back, Maddie realized their betrayal was a strange kind of gift. It forced her to break free from a prison she didn't even know she was in. She began living for herself, making decisions not to please anyone, not to be seen as the perfect daughter, but simply because they were what she wanted. For the first time, she was free. Months later, her family gathered again, this time for the wedding of another cousin. Maddie wasn't sure how she'd feel attending. It was impossible not to remember her own ruined day, but she went. She arrived with her head held high, dressed simply but beautifully, walking into the hall without fear. This wasn't about Ethan or Samantha anymore. This was about her reclaiming the right to live without shame. Samantha wasn't there. The whisper said her life had unraveled, friends gone, family ties severed, even her job slipping away. Ethan was long gone too. No one even mentioned his name. And Maddie's father? He sat quietly on the sideline. Once, he would have commanded attention, his booming voice filling the room. Now, he seemed small, diminished. Not because others had silenced him, but because Maddie no longer looked at him with the fearful obedience that once gave him power. At one point, their eyes met across the room. Maddie didn't glare at him, nor did she smile. She simply looked through him. He seemed to flinch, realizing in that moment that he had lost something far greater than control over his daughter's wedding. He had lost his daughter's respect. And that was a wound no money, no pride, no authority could heal. As the night ended, Maddie stood outside beneath the lights strung over the garden, breathing in the cool evening air. She whispered to herself, almost like a vow, "I'm not broken. I'm free." And in that quiet moment, her story came full circle. Dad canceled my wedding saying, "We're not funding this drama." But in the end, the real drama wasn't losing a wedding. It was finally losing the people who never truly cared about me. Do you believe Maddie was right to cut off Ethan, Samantha, and even her own father, or should she have given them another chance? I'd really love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if stories like this keep you hooked, make sure to hit subscribe and tap the notification bell so you never miss the next one.